So how do you go about developing an interview guide, also known as an interview schedule? Here I'm going to share with you some tips that are quite useful in order to do this, stemming from your knowledge of the literature and the research questions that you have come up with. So the first one is this: consider in response to the research problem or the research questions, what is it about this particular issue that's puzzling you? What is it about the thing that you're interested in that you want to know more about? And use these kind of questions, use this uncertainty in order to come up with new questions, more things you'd like to find out about in a lot more detail. And this relates to point 2, which is to write down these ideas, write down these random thoughts about the topic, and also any other thoughts you might have through reflecting on what you've finished or accomplished already, discussions with other individuals, for example, other students, your peers, or your supervisor. And also, I think, ideas that you come across in the literature, things that you come across that make you curious or that intrigue you from the literature. Thirdly, in relation to your research questions, ask yourself, what do you need to know in order to answer your research questions? So in order to effectively, to comprehensively address or answer your research questions, what is it that you need to know or to find out about? So, for example, if you're asking or you want to find out about your participants' responses to written feedback, particularly in terms of their attitudes and their emotional responses, you're going to want to find out. You're going to want to ask them in an interview how satisfied they are with the feedback. Is there anything, for example, they would like you to change about the feedback? Or concerning emotions, what were the participants' emotional responses when they received the feedback? How did it make them feel? Did it make them feel satisfied, unhappy, angry even? So these sorts of this sort of thinking can help to develop these early research questions that you can later evolve and refine. And it's important that as you go, that as you begin to brainstorm these early questions, that you start to try to order these and structure these into a kind of emerging guide or emerging schedule, because you want to avoid a situation where you have these overlapping questions. You might want to consolidate questions so that a question that you were asking that was quite similar to another one could be included as a prompt or just as a probe in this question rather than as a separate question altogether. And you're going to want to think as well about the order in which you're going to ask the questions. What are you going to begin with? What's something fairly, I guess we could say, easy or comfortable to begin with to encourage the participants to open up, make them feel comfortable. You're not going to want to ask particularly demanding or cognitively taxing questions right at the beginning of the interview. So hopefully as you go through the literature, that you have a look at other studies, that you consolidate your own perspectives and thoughts on the nature and purpose of your research and what you want to achieve with it. The questions that you'll need to ask in the interview will become clearer. And remember as well that the prompt is flexible, so you're not looking to come up with lots and lots of questions. There's no obligation to ask all of the questions as well. The prompt should be flexible. It should be implemented flexibly in terms of what the participants say in response to your questions. So you want to make sure that you're not inadvertently ending up with a structured interview guide instead of a semi-structured one, which is your aim. And finally, I put this one in bold. So I think it's really important, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing this, and it's to look at the actual interview questions that other empirical studies use, which hopefully might be attached as an appendix in the research. So if you go to the end of the article, the journal article, you might find as an appendix the research questions that the researchers asked. They may also be in the methodology section, perhaps as a very brief examples, questions that were asked, or a supplementary material where you might need to go to the publisher's website in order to download a Word document copy of the interview questions. I'm not saying that you can or should lift these questions or copy them word for word for your own research. You'll want to consider whether they're suitable, whether they can be adapted. But it is quite helpful, I think, to look at how other people approach this, because it's likely that such questions have gone through a stage of validation where they might have solicited feedback on their interview questions. They might have adapted them in relation to that feedback, so they've got a more rigorous interview guide to use, and in which case you're going to be taking inspiration from something that's hopefully high quality. So I think it's a good practice, and I think it's important as well to be honest and upfront in your research methodology section, and say where you have taken inspiration from, and credit the authors who've provided the inspiration for particular questions that you might have adapted.